God and made ineffectual his power, and it has disillusioned the people and lost their confidence. I have no doubt that millions will go to hell because of the unscriptural practice of women preachers. Another reason for studying the subject of women in the church is to discern the differences between men and women, particularly in their response to spiritual values. Although this volume does not approach the subject from a sociological or psychological perspective, it does seek to shed light on such issues. The question of whether or not women are more inclined to be emotional than men will be touched on, as will the fact that women constitute a higher percentage of church members than do men. Sociologist Peter Berger has attempted to explain this by suggesting that the impact of secularization has tended to be stronger on men than on women. Because men have traditionally been more involved in the workplace and the public arena than women have, they have been more quickly exposed to new ideas, especially secular thought. Women, on the other hand, who have traditionally been the keepers of the home, have had fewer challenges to their religious values and have had a greater concern to maintain the religious traditions that uphold domestic stability. Certain questions repeatedly present themselves to anyone who surveys this history. What cultural factors influence the role of women? How has biblical exegesis influenced that role? What restrictions and opposition did women face? How did women balance their dual responsibilities for ministry and family? Or how did they deal with singleness? Are there any discernible trends such as increasing restrictions, increasing opportunities, or growing acceptance followed by reaction? Such questions reveal that our task is not only to inquire about the actual life and ministry of women in the church, but also to observe how they were perceived by men throughout the course of church history. As such, this study is not only a history of women in the church, but also a history of changing perspectives about women. Before definitive conclusions can be drawn regarding women in church history, much more study needs to be done. But even at this point, there are many patterns and trends that have emerged. One obvious generalization that can be made is that women were very prominent in church history. The history of religion is probably the only field of history where women have had such an influential role, even though they were systematically denied positions of authority. Another pattern indicated by our research suggests that women often had significant leadership positions during the initial pioneering and developmental stages of a movement, only to be replaced by men as the movement became more respectable. Although this trend has been particularly characteristic of the 20th century, it was identified a century ago by Frances Willard. In her book, Women in the Pulpit, published in 1888, she said essentially the same thing. In the proportion that any church approaches the dimensions of a hierarchy, the admission of women to the priestly class becomes difficult. Still another discernible pattern is that throughout the history of the church, different views on women have coexisted within the same culture or religion. It is incorrect to assume that leaders or representatives of a particular movement, example, the ancient Jewish rabbis, had a monolithic understanding of women. Likewise, we have found that women have been very active in a wide variety of ministries within the institutionalized church, despite pronouncements and official decrees to the contrary. There are many other generalizations that can be made about women in ministry. For example, a personal religious call, sometimes accompanied by visions or trances, has been an important factor in justifying ministry for women historically, as it has been for justifying the ministry of lay men who sought preaching roles in the church. It is also true that women appear to have been far more concerned with social needs and the unity of the believers than with doctrinal issues, particularly the non-essentials of the Christian creed. As such, we have found that they were often more eager to seek unity across denominational lines. Indeed, women have had a significant influence on ecumenical activities in the church. We have challenged a number of popularly held assumptions regarding women in the church. The so-called liberal churches, for example, have not always been more open to the ministry of women, nor have the so-called conservative churches been consistently more closed to it. Another myth that needs to be dispelled is that women are more easily deceived than men, and are thus more often the
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.